given it's a spotlight somewhat, I wanted to also kind of give a little bit of background to myself and a little bit about the origins of this course. So here's early days for me that influence a lot of what I ended up doing in my professional career. As a Stanford undergraduate, I was invited to be a research assistant for Jane Goodall at Gombe Stream Research Center. So you see Jane there. And here I am with one of the chimps I was studying, a little goblin there. And that kind of like turned me on incredibly to tropical rainforest ecology. Somewhat primate behavior and ecology, but I really got keyed into tropical forest ecology and really loved it. So it definitely influenced my career pathway. And a result of that, I stepped down from my plan to go to medical school. Well, I actually went for a semester and then changed to do a PhD in tropical ecology in the graduate group in ecology at UC Davis. And that led to the position I took in way back in 1983 as an assistant professor in bioanthro at Harvard. So I've been at Harvard forever. And immediately thereafter, in 1984, I set up a long-term research station at this place, Gunung Palung National Park. And some of you may have had a course from me or read something about this. But anyway, that research station still is ongoing. We just had a 40-year reunion. For the first 20 years or so, I was heavily involved here, spending anywhere from 3 to 6 months a year there. So here you see an earlier version of me in 1984 doing the original exploration of the national park to find a good place for the research station. And so that kind of dominated my professional research career and teaching career for about 15 years. And during that time, I was able to take a cohort of students every year to run the long-term data collection and to experience this rainforest. So you see the group, I think this is from 1985 that you see down in the lower right here. And all these people ended up having wonderful careers, very important careers in tropical rainforest ecology and conservation, still active in that. So that's probably one of the best things I've ever done is provide these opportunities for, it must have been well over 50 students from all over the world, some of them Harvard students, 4 of them here are actually Harvard students, but from all over the world to experience this and start their careers in tropical rainforest conservation. So that's all I want to say about that before we turn to the course spotlight Jessica asked me to focus on. So that's the E143 class, Evaluating Sustainable Food Systems and Other Enterprises in Rural Areas with a View from Tuscany. So the title is cumbersome, but it emphasizes a focus on sustainable food systems, especially regenerative agriculture. And the enterprises kind of points to the fact that there's a heavy emphasis on financial appraisal of possible enterprises. And it had to throw in this particular comment about Tuscany because from May 3rd to 10th this coming year in 2026, we'll be staying again at the property that is the highlight of the course, I think, for everyone here in Tuscany, outside of Siena, that you see down in the lower left here, the Tenuta di Spinocchia, which is a traditional family historical estate that dates from the 1200s, active in agriculture. And you can actually see from this photo that it's actually embedded within a nature reserve, and about 70% of the entire property is forested. You can see olive orchards and vineyards here, and a big plano or pasture land for the heritage species of pig, the Cinta senese up there. Yeah, and anyway, that's a little spotlight on the course. So what does it focus on? Regenerative agriculture, financial analysis, but also all sorts of issues having to do with rural sustainability, including agritourism, which often in the case that places trying to switch over and practice regenerative agriculture rely on one of their income streams from agritourism. And also at Spinocchia, they have a strong commitment towards sustainability approaches to waste management and energy. So you see the tower from the castle here, which dates from, well, probably about 1100, and most of the villa where the students stay right here in these buildings date from around 17 or 1800. A little bit unclear how old they are. So why did I come to this course? Actually, I have sort of weird deep roots in agriculture. I come from the Central Valley, grew up in the Central Valley of California. And what you see here is an article I just came up with 15 minutes ago that talks about regenerative walnut orchards, regenerative approaches to walnut ranching or farming right from the Central Valley. And imagine that when I grew up, we had a big walnut orchard, and normally walnut orchards are clean below, very tightly mown grass or even dirt to enable people to pick up the walnuts after they're knocked down. Well, we couldn't do that because our relatively poor economic status meant that we had livestock grazing underneath the walnut trees on our little 5 acres. So we had a pasture land growing with the walnut trees. And I remember, well, maybe 15 years ago, I was asked to participate in a conference that was focusing carbon storage from regenerative agriculture. They wanted me to focus on sequestration of carbon in forests. And I realized in the conference that I was the only forest type guy there that was giving a background in carbon storage in forests, because the main topic of the group presenting the symposium and speaking there was about the value of sequestering carbon in the soil. So they're making a big push on that. And I ended up kind of a little bit being a, what would you call it, a little bit black sheep whipping boy, because most people were arguing, well, there's an overemphasis on carbon storage in forests. We really ought to be thinking about regenerative agriculture. And so in thinking about this, I realized that, well, this is my background. Unbeknownst to me, my family was actually practicing regenerative agricultural techniques by combining the function of having farm animals grazing underneath walnut trees. So this kind of dual function of the land there. So that's kind of indicative of the fact that I've always had this interest in the problem of sustaining rural landscapes and making them thrive economically and having their ecological benefits there. So that was one of the foci prompting me to develop this course. So here's a couple of the required books that emphasize this idea of sustainable harvesting from the land. The one on the right is about forest farming. The one on the left is a really great introductory book to regenerative agriculture, the transition from industrial farming to regenerative agriculture. So there's another stream in the class then, which is spreadsheet analysis. And this is engendered by the fact that for a long time in my academic research teaching history, I've often thought that both sustainability topics in general and agriculture and forestry topics in particular lack kind of a hard-nosed approach towards evaluating a prospective treatment or cropping model, for instance, that isn't borne out in some kind of financial appraisal, which asks the question, can people actually make a living practicing these different forms of regenerative agriculture? So one of the required books is this funny titled thing, The Organic Farmer's Business Handbook. And Wiswall makes the emphasis that most farmers think about producing crops rather than producing profits. And that's the downfall and demise of lots of farmers, because they think and overemphasize a focus on producing really nice crops and products for the market rather than asking themselves if a particular crop is financially viable. And so this book makes that point really hard for students in the course. They spend time doing a few little financial modeling type things to get familiar with spreadsheet analysis of different variables that overall have to do with determining whether or not a particular farm enterprise would be profitable rather than just productive. So why this heavy emphasis also on financial appraisal in this class? I actually look at this class as serving as a skills-based development for people who want to take this approach to evaluating enterprises of any sort. You have a good idea, you think it leads to improved sustainability outcomes in a business, in a company, in a farm, whatever it is. Well, one thing you should do is ask yourself, can this be profitably implemented? Can someone make a living at it? Can a company yield profits from doing that? And the key to that is doing some kind of financial appraisal, some kind of cost benefit analysis. I don't want to go into the details of this, but I was an early convert to this. This is a paper, I think the very first paper anyone like myself in tropical forestry wrote, emphasizing the fact that you need to do combined ecological and economic analysis to evaluate if something is going to be profitable. And so I was prompted to learn these approaches and start implementing both myself and encouraging my students to do this because I attended a conference on tropical forest ecologists in Malaysia. I think it was 1989. And all of us who were kind of prominent as tropical forest ecologists were asked to join together at these 2 days of workshops with tropical forest managers, representatives from the government, from various logging companies. And we were supposed to take it upon ourselves to teach them the results coming out of the practice of tropical forest ecology, largely conducted in primary forests, unlogged forests. Everybody's interested in topics, including myself, in natural forests and what was going on as far as ecological mechanisms having to do with tropical tree diversity and lots of other topics. And I remember going out to dinner after the first night of the conference there with my colleagues. And at some point I pointed out to them, did you see what happened to the audience in the afternoon after my presentation and lots of those in the morning? And I said, I noticed that all the practicing foresters left. They didn't come back for the afternoon. That's because we didn't have anything to tell them. You know, all our kind of theories about the maintenance of species diversity and how important tropical tree growth rates were, blah, 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 all fall on deaf ears because we weren't speaking their language. And their language is, can we make money from this? What exactly can we do to enhance the financial profitability, or by implementing some things that look like sustainable harvesting practices that don't compromise the financial viability of our logging operations? And so this was a paper that I wrote with colleagues that emphasized this approach. You got to actually combine the integration of these ecological and economic variables in order to examine whether a practice would be profitable. And then, this is dates from my decades of work at Gunung Palung National Park. And this is about 10 years later, I guess about, early 2000s, when I was involved in a community forestry project. And this also emphasized the role of this kind of analysis to influence practices, in this case, forestry policy by the Indonesian government. So we're looking at the border of Gunung Palung National Park, and what you see here is the national park itself, kind of in the hazy background. Here's an area of slightly burned over area because this is an ex-production forest, a forest meant to be sustainably managed by some forestry company. And because the forestry company had pulled out after taking some profits, it was no longer under a governmental, commercial kind of incentive system, no longer profitable for a company to use and manage. So instead, a forest fire during a dry season was able to penetrate. No one bothered putting it out. There are some burned areas of forest in this foreground here, the kind of like light brown area here. And then, of course, bordering this is agricultural areas like you have almost everywhere. And so what I and some colleagues developed was a concept for community forestry to allow people living essentially in these agricultural areas to return to their kind of traditional ways of selectively logging areas near them and to be able to market the wood themselves. Well, at this time in Indonesia, it was illegal for people locally in communities to actually harvest and market wood. And so this seemed like an option that made a lot of sense ecologically under low impact logging, allowing all this area to be have an important conservation function, provide livelihood support for people in these communities, kind of a win-win-win situation. That's me and my wonderful graduate student at that time, Gary Paoli, actually doing experiments in this area where we're looking at sawn wood yields from cutting down trees of different species, and then combining this into a financial model. Here we are kind of looking at evaluating how much can be gained from sawmilling this wood, what the market prices were, and essentially building an enterprise financial model. In this case, you're looking at traditional methods of hauling wood out of these swampy areas, which, even though it looks very inefficient, provides a lot of jobs for people and is ecologically very low damage to the existing forest stand from this kind of selective logging of several trees per acre. And so this project actually, over the next 5 years, turned out to be incredibly successful from a policy perspective. And that's because if you look here, kind of a meeting we had with a bunch of government people representing different Ministry of Forestry, Ministry of Environment, various politicians. The presentation of the spreadsheet analysis was convincing to them in terms of the fact that the local community could sustainably do this ecologically. The forestry model and its variations we presented looked very successful from that perspective. It could provide a lot of jobs and sustainable income to the local communities participating in this. And importantly, the government could get tax revenue from the marketing of the wood. So it very much was a win-win-win policy. And it was really based on this summer set of data from doing the financial appraisal that carried the day. And here you see we were able to implement the project from funding by U.S. taxpayers via USAID. And you can see myself here kind of trying to argue to this very skeptical looking representative from USAID how valuable this would be in this win-win-win perspective. And of course, the main beneficiary of this would be people from the local communities that you see in these photos in the bottom. And as a result of that, I would say that financial analysis demonstrating the viability of this from these different kind of stakeholder perspectives, Indonesia changed their law. They did it very quickly, which was what countries like Indonesia could do. By that following year, it became the law of the land that local communities had the legal right to create forestry enterprises, harvest and market their own wood from production forests. So that looks like a great accomplishment. I look at that as one of the best accomplishments, very surprisingly, in my research life. So that leads me to the second kind of assignments people do in the 143 class, which are these kinds of financial appraisals. So here you see it there where you're looking at a lot of variables on these line items that eventually calculates streams of revenue over a period of time. Here you can see over a period of 15 years, a stream of revenue right here in the parlance of BCA, benefits and costs of this, where you're modeling this kind of expectation, forecasting net present value as a metric of financial profitability into the future from various streams of revenue, whether they're carbon payments or products you actually sell or taxes you save or whatever it might be. And you're subtracting from those net benefits all the costs involved in implementing this project or enterprise if you haven't. So this is a exercise students in the class do based on a hypothetical hazelnut addition to a farm. So I want to finish up with just some photos of the class itself, because the class then involves these Zoom meetings weekly to learn all about regenerative agriculture, sustainable farm systems, all kinds of discussions about that. The various kinds of spreadsheet exercises, including one that students do themselves on their own specified project as a major assignment. And then the week in Tuscany. This is a very first class from May of 2015, so the class is about 10 years old. During COVID, people couldn't go to Tuscany itself. This was an addition. It started out as a 2-week class, which meant that people had to forego a lot of time themselves. After a couple of years of this, I realized that many students couldn't attend this because they couldn't commit 2 weeks away from their personal life or work life to do this. So it changed to a 1 week in Tuscany class, which has been very, very successful and allowed a lot more students to go. I just want to highlight a few people here. This is Randall Stratton, and this is John O'Keefe. Randall and John were Harvard freshman roommates in 1968. And they became instrumental in luring me to this place because Randall is the farm manager and owner of the property. His wife actually owns it, but he was the manager of the property. John was the director of the Harvard Forest in Petersham, Western Mass. And I used to take a summer ecology, forest ecology field trip to the Harvard Forest. And John and I would spend the day lecturing to students, going out in the field, talking about stuff. And many years in a row, John would always say to me, hey, you have to go to visit Spinocchia in Tuscany, where my ex-college roommate Randall runs this organic farming enterprise and sustainability educational set of programs. And I said, yeah, okay. And finally, this fit in with one of my wife and my trips to Italy. And I actually stayed there. And as soon as I saw the property, I became determined that there could be some kind of Harvard Extension course set up there. So Randall and I conspired for a few days. What would this course be like? And that's what 143 evolved in. So it's very much like the tail wagging the dog, right? I said, I know that rural sustainability is something our program doesn't address very well. I'm a big proponent of this. I'm a big proponent of people learning the skill of spreadsheet modeling, especially when it comes to cost benefit or financial and economic appraisal. And maybe this would be a great place and a great kind of course to do that, because people could model the different enterprises there. You can actually see the vineyard over there on the left. So this is a very first class, and it was very, very successful. And this is last year's class, 2025, I should say, this year's class, I should say. Jessica will recognize some of these photos, which I haven't credited because I just grabbed them off our WhatsApp kind of group line. So sorry for those of you who contributed these photos. It wasn't even clear sometimes whose photo they were on the WhatsApp feed. But anyway, I just grabbed some just to illustrate what a good time people have. So here's a group on the villa stores. These are some of the two-person rooms people stay in. May generally features gorgeous weather, but can be quite variable. So you can have some rainy days, but you can see there's lots of time in the course, in addition to the field lectures that we have generally about every day, even twice a day. There's lots of time for people to just hang out and enjoy each other's company and discuss things. Here's a nice group shot of kind of like, I think, Jessica, this must be kind of like one of the party time nights. I shouldn't emphasize that because it's a very serious course. And here's people actually learning from some research they themselves did on collecting soil samples and analyzing them as well as we can there. So Spinocchia features all these very diverse enterprises, all kind of organized and constantly being evaluated for improvement in their sustainability impacts, from organic, now natural wine production, to producing high quality finished meats from the Cinta Senese, to some other livestock enterprises, olive oil production on the property, etc. And so people learn a lot about all these enterprises as we do it. Here's a view of some of the farmhouses on the property with the vineyards on the left here. One of the enterprises has to do with wood harvesting, so it's an interesting exercise to actually gather some data, as we did this last spring, and actually calculate carbon sequestration going on in the various types of forest on the property. Firewood production and selling is what fuels the energy in the main villa house and also is sold in the communities. It's an olive orchard in the bottom right. You can see some of the old-time vegetable garden that's been replaced now in the last couple years, but the organic vegetable garden and most of the food, almost all the food that's served as meals at Spanokia come from the property itself under organic and now increasingly regenerative vegetable gardening practices. And here you see the very interesting wastewater system that actually is filtered down. And down here, you can't see it, but after being filtered through this kind of wetland area, naturally, it ends up in a pond. And as of this last year, Spanokius was able to institute a program of pumping this pond water, reused gray water, if you will, now filtered through this process uphill and allow it to water the developing fruit orchard by gravity fed downhill. So lots of interesting sustainability practices going on the property you're able to learn about. So let me stop there. Amazingly, that seemed to be almost exactly a half hour, Jess. I never would
That
have.
was incredible. Perfect.
Okay.
10 out of 10. All right. I'm going to open it up to questions. Thank you. Feel free to raise your hand and then we can call on you. Now, everyone, don't do it at once.
This is a very quick Q&A.
Yeah, super quick. No. So I'll go ahead since we're recording this. Okay, Lindsay has one. Perfect.
That's not a question. I just want to say I'm really impressed by this. This is not the field that I'm in. I'm in the ALM in management, and we have like accounting and economics classes, but I haven't taken any classes where we're going to like put in stuff that we want to do and analyze the information. And so I'm like, how can I do this? And then I've been on an organic food diet for almost a decade. I'm like, how can I go and make it fit in the field? So I hope they open this up to management field, because it sounds like it would be very applicable, even though like maybe we're not focused on the sustainability or on farming, but we can easily transfer those skills and maybe learn something about sustainability that we didn't know.
I think it's open to anybody, Lindsay. You can register for it. Right now, it's already on the wait list.
I'm sure it is. It's
I
not
would
going to
get on the
count
wait
towards the
list if
degree.
you're interested. Yeah, get on the wait list. And I think you're absolutely right. It's amazing that this kind of enterprise analysis, cost benefit analysis is often not taught even in management or even business classes sometimes. It's amazing to me because it just seems so fundamental. And it really makes a difference in these sustainability fields where everybody's really excited about various types of sustainability, I think writ large, not just agriculture, but sustainability ideas in general. And they want to say, look, we can get this if we do this. And my often cautionary kind of self says, well, how much does that cost? And does it really pay off doing that? I can see there would be benefits, but do they actually make sense? I think constantly we're kind of faced, especially with farming stuff, is that people would love to institute this thing because they see it's better for the health of the soil. It leads to more nutritious products, all this kind of stuff. But you know, you have to separate a practice, a farming practice of what we would call hobby type practice, which means you don't care if you make money on it. You want to have fun doing this, and you want to enjoy the kind of sustainability benefits, maybe benefits for your family and kids working on it, all kinds of stuff like that. There's a real benefits from whether or not this is a practice where people can actually make a living at it. Can it become part of the agricultural set of practices that are actually implemented? Because right now, a tiny, what's that number, Jess? Maybe 1% of agricultural land in the US, and probably for the world for that matter, is under regenerative practices.
Yeah.
The rest of it is heavy, intensive, plowing, chemical use, industrial agriculture. And so to make that shift towards better soil health, to gain the benefits of stored soil, carbon, to lower the risk from pesticide and herbicide use, a much higher percentage of agricultural production should become organic/regenerative. In all the cases, we always have to ask, for that to be incentivized, it has to perform well from a financial perspective. Long answer to your question.
That was an excellent answer and great question. Yeah, I would ask your advisor and see if it works within the management side of things at all, because truly it was what, keep in mind, yes, you go to Italy, so it's pretty excellent. But outside of that, the thing I really loved about this course is you leave with a tangible skill, like one that is useful, whether you are going to become a farmer, whether you're going to start your own business, whether you're going to buy a business, whatever it is, you can understand the numbers, and then you're not just, yeah, I think that should take this much money or this long. It really like breaks it down in a really wonderful way.
If you're interested in the course, you should get on the waiting list, because it turns out that some of the people who register early end up, when they find out more about it or whatever, they decide not to take it. So if you want to, get on the waiting list and hang out there and see what happens.
So last year or last spring, I actually thought I had submitted my cart, but I didn't. And so I was like one of the first people, because I knew I was coming for your course. And then I was like, why does this not show me what my classes are? And I realized I didn't. And I did get in off the waiting list. So there is truly hope if you do end up on the waiting list.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead and hang out there, because sometimes this doesn't get resolved till January. I should have emphasized that there's a deadline for paying the Spinocchia cost by like January 10th. And that's kind of like the put up or shut up kind of deadline. And so there's always a few people who decide by then, oh, they're not going to take the course. They're not going to submit those costs. And then it pops open more places from the waiting list. So hang out then.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Thank you
so
guys.
much.
Really enjoyed this.
Talk to you later.
Yes. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.